My name's Richard, and I've got two instruments here that I've made. There's a guitar, which is a long scale guitar, and a mandolin, which is a long scale mandolin. They've both got floating soundboards on them, and this is the example of a floating soundboard which could sit on this guitar if I wanted to exchange it, and that's sort of a view of it. It's sort of got a radiating sort of spoke, sort of mushroom-like soundboard. So I'll play both of them just so that there's some idea of what they're like. So it sounds pretty much like a normal guitar, really. It's got a huge range in colour. And now we'll do the mandolin. And okay, now what we've got here with this instrument and with the other instrument basically is it's a muting system, and it works like this. The best thing to do is actually to show how it works. We've got on the back of this instrument here, we've got an Allen key, and if I just chuck this thing in here, you'll be able to hear it. I'll do it as best I can. Now this instrument is quiet, so if it was plugged in, if it had a piezo on the mute which is pushed into this, it'd be a plugged in instrument. But what's actually more important is the fact that now the downward force of the strings on this soundboard is neutralised, so when you're not playing the instrument, this instrument actually is resting, and the soundboard, which can fatigue here on the sides, it won't happen, and you'd need more than a lifetime's of playing for this to actually fatigue, which means that you can use timbers which actually are highly susceptible to fatigue or creep. I'll do that again with this one. This instrument right now has not got the mute on, so you can hear. Now if I put the mute on, you'll hear the difference once again. There we go, so the mute's on. It should be here, you can hear the mute's on. Now I'll take the mute off. I'll play it with the mute off just briefly. Now I'll put the mute back on. There, the mute's on, and you can hear it's completely different. That once again, that's resting this soundboard from fatigue when you're not playing it, which is a really good thing. Because this particular soundboard here is sitting in a little well, you can have a locked on bridge, which means there's no drifting or loss of intonation or anything like that. So I think the best thing to do is get on with dismantling this instrument now so that it can really be seen for what it is. So I'll just detune it. Oh, there you go. You can hear the soundboard's lifted off the mute. It suddenly gets louder. This is where the fun really begins. Nearly there, nearly there. Okay, here we go. So we've got a soundboard that's on the instrument. Whoops, and now it's off, which is, so this soundboard here is a bit blotchy, but it's got a shellac finish on it, as with this one, and it certainly improved the sound of it. Normally a finish on a soundboard reduces the sound, but shellac, for some reason, does a wonderful job. So if we're looking at this instrument now, the best thing to do would be to actually remove the strings, which doesn't take very long, fortunately. So I'll remove the tailpiece too, because it'll just get in the road while we're showing the instrument for what it is. This tailpiece, if there's ever a humbucker or a magnetic put on to this instrument, this tailpiece is a steel piece which goes into a piece of steel here and a piece of steel there, which means that acts as can be the earth for the tailpiece. Okay, so this is a quick release system. It's quite simple and it's effective. It takes either ball or loop strings, which is a good thing about it. Okay, for the fun bit here, we've got a neck which is held on. Before I take it off, this little screw here, which is another Allen key, which is the same as the one that works here, and actually for that matter on the truss rod, this actually allows the neck to swing. So I'll just give a demonstration of that. As you can see, the neck's swinging, and it swings onto the Allen key, and then as that Allen key is screwed in, the neck goes down. So you can adjust string height really easily, very quickly, and not much intonation variability there. Okay, so this neck now can come off, which is quite simple. So you can see here where the Allen key screws into the neck. So it basically means it's possible now to work on this instrument or this neck without having to worry about the other. So essentially with this particular guitar system, you've got three parts. You've got the neck, the body and the soundboard, as opposed to one piece. I wouldn't go so far as to say that this is interchangeable. It just basically means it can be put in a vise, and all this fretwork can be done really easily without having to worry about the body, or vice versa. And interchangeable soundboards is pretty obvious with this, but just so that it can be seen what's going on here inside this instrument here, this is the muting system, and it works best if it's just a solid part here. But if we if I screw the mute back in, you'll see it just, I'll try and stay still. Hang on, I'll put it on the table so you can see. There's the mute coming up and there's the mute going down. It's a fairly simple mechanism and it goes down and locks, and it's out of the road for when you're playing acoustically, or if, for instance, if there's a piezo on there, this can go up and hit the soundboard and mute it at the same time. And when the mute's on, that's the best way to store the instrument, because the downward force of the strings is no longer an issue, which is a good thing. So it's a bit possibly over-engineered, but it's just my interpretation of a guitar, and it produces a unique sound. It's not better or worse. I think with the variability of timbres, like for instance, we've got the two soundboards here. This one here is Australian red cedar, and it looks blotchy, but I like the sound of it. And this one here is King Billy Pine from Tasmania. Now this King Billy Pine is really soft, so you get fundamentals as opposed to the upper partials. So it might suit a more jazz style of playing, whereas this one's more of a rhythm with more of the upper partials, or the range of sounds from it. With these soundboards, we've got this one here, which weighs all up about 120 grams. This is about an ounce, the bridge system on it, and I've got a bridge system here which has just been taken off this one so it can be seen more clearly. This is a standard height adjustable bridge, but it's been locked down onto this piece here, and normally these height adjustable bridges just sit there and they move around a fair bit because the string angle is such that it's forcing it forward. Whereas if it's locked in position, it's a good thing, because you can fix the intonation and it stays there. So you can see here, intonation can be varied, because what we have here is, I'll just take that out. What we've got there is a slotted system. So if it needs to be moved back further or forward further, it can be slotted more. It's just a needle file which is the same size as this screw, it's not rocket science. So that's a good thing for bridges, because to be able to actually fix your intonation as a player, it's difficult to do on most acoustic guitars. The intonation that you get is what you're stuck with. This system here is really good because you can interchange the soundboards, and because they're dead central, you can use the same bridge and you'll have the same result. So what I'm giving away is not this particular system here so much as this here. This mute system is a game changer in my opinion, because with all soundboards what actually happens is the string force is the thing that wakes them up, but it also wears them out. So if the instrument's not wearing out when you're not playing it, that's a good thing. And you know, a guitar can be made a million different ways. So what I'm giving away is this basic system. Anybody could copy this with a little bit of advice and help, this particular system. So what it actually does, so that people can understand that, is you've got string force, and the string force is pushing like this, and with a normal resonator there's a cover plate which stops this string force from collapsing the instrument over time. Well, actually it can happen pretty damn quickly. At the same time, with a normal resonator, you have an aluminium cone which is really sensitive to being touched, so the cover plate protects that. Because this compression bar is here in place with, I might add, with a bit of ebony, just to make sure that there's no compression at all built into it. There's no need for the cover plate, because this soundboard is basically robust enough to be sitting on the surface. The other thing is that instead of being a really small, sort of about a 10-inch resonator, this is a big 13, I think it's 13.5 inch or 320 mils, something like that, resonator, which means you don't need to have all this support system going down to the back here, or in some instruments they have a sound well. You don't need that, because it's so close to the sides that there's no problems there with that, as far as I know so far, and I've been doing this for about 10 years. So these soundboards are capable of actually sort of moulding into the top of the instrument, and they can take, the most important thing, as I'll explain this here, is they can take a way bigger break angle. Now the break angle is the change of direction of strings. Now on an aluminium cone system, the change of direction of strings is minimal, which means that they can pretty easily rattle around, and if they have a decent break angle, because they're aluminium and thin, they literally just fold up and disappear down inside the instrument. So break angle is critical. With this, the break angle actually wakens the instrument up, because as you can see, the break angle causes an S curving. You might be able to see that moving there. I'll just do it. You can see that moving. Now that's the break angle is enough force there to cause that to get an S curve. Now what this has got is an S curve all the way around. So you've got an induced arch here, which is not restrictive to a normal induced arch where the timbers are just going that way. And you've got the reverse curve happening there. So it wakes up, it actually starts to really sing and ring like a saw, if you've ever seen an S curve on a saw. And it can handle that, which is something that the aluminium cones don't have the opportunity to do. And they're all aluminium, whereas this can be a huge variety of timbers. I'm looking forward to start to use torrefied spruce soon. It's probably worth mentioning how this evolved, which is quite humorous really in some respects, because I was making these soundboards for some time, and what I noticed was that if the soundboard was stuck to the sides, it killed it. It lost all its sustain, and it had about the same sort of attack, but the sustain disappeared. And if you've got too much sustain, you can easily mute it as a player, so I like sustain. But what actually happened is I had this thought bubble, it wasn't much more than that, of actually making the backs radiant like the top. And this is the history of this idea, it's worth mentioning. And of course all these timbers were going into one point, and I didn't know what to do with that point, so I was chucking coins in there, and I bought up a whole lot of 1 cent coins, because they've got I think it's an echidna on them, one of my favourite little critters, and I was sticking it there. And then one day I was told by a jazz musician that jazz guitars are quiet because if they're plugged in, they don't feed back. And I thought to myself, aha, if I put a mute, which is here, and kill the sound, it won't feed back. And sure enough, that's exactly what happens. They don't feed back. Well, they do, but they're less likely to. And the main feedback with an acoustic guitar is usually the bass. And of course, as soon as you've rammed something into the soundboard, the bass disappears. The bass feedback disappears. Now the neck, I suppose it's worth discussing. First up, Shirtler tuners. This is not a plug for them, but I like the Shirtler tuners. They're smooth. They're the best tuners I've ever actually used. But getting back to the neck. Now the issue with necks is that they need to be comfortable, and for me, comfortable is tuning like that. But if you've got a normal system that tunes like that, you normally have a piece down the middle, and that piece down the middle means that the strings flog around and it's a pain in the bum stringing it up and taking them off, and it's not quick. So the theory was to remove the middle bit and just do this. So that's basically what happened there. And this is a piece that I designed, which is a 10 ply, believe it or not, 10 pieces of Australian myrtle from Tassie, which go around and they're scarfed onto this central piece here. And yeah, it works. It works pretty well. It's super strong. There's no way known you could ever drop this and break that. You'd have to smash the living daylights out of this and it still would not break. It's because it's, as you can see, it's scarfed onto this central piece of timber, which is jarrah, by the way. And then of course the bit on the side, that there is celery top pine, also from Tasmania. And the piece, this is inspired by, this particular design here is inspired by Ken Parker, Archtops. He's come up with a system where what actually happens is the thing, it goes into the body, and he's got a screw here so it goes up and down. And for some reason it occurred to me that it might be easier just to have it swinging. So swinging works for me. Ken Parker's system is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And thank you, Ken, for coming up with such a great idea. This middle bit here, unlike Ken Parker's, is ebony from Honiara, and it does the job because it's literally only got a shear force here that no way known is it ever going to shear. So, and it's built into this neck as well, so it's well and truly anchored into the neck. It's not, this hole is not cut, it's actually built into it, and it's completely sealed in. My general thrust as a luthier has been function and sound, and in doing that I've stepped right outside of the acceptable box that most musicians would consider purchasable. And for instance, this instrument, which takes roughly 200 hours to make, there wouldn't be too many musicians that would risk, I guess, such a completely different looking concept from purchasing. And I understand that because, I mean, me sitting here playing this instrument, you know, like it might sound fantastic, but this is just a recording. And the other reality is I don't make many of these instruments. I'm probably only making 3 or 4 a year. So it's not, the way I see it, it's not a viable thing at this point in time for me to try and sell the instruments. I'm pleased to be able to show the design. What I'm not going to show is the process which I've come up with to make these. The process is my secret. It's taken 10 years and I'm not going to tell anybody how I've done that. And if people try to copy it, well, good on them. I'll consider that flattery. But what I have for sale is these soundboards, and it's for luthiers or players who want to possibly persuade a luthier to give a go, because what this is a wood cone, and this is a floating system which it works. It has good sound, great projection, lots of sustain. Some people might disagree with that, but for me it's a unique sound, and I think a unique sound is, well, a little bit more colour doesn't hurt. So I'm offering these as a product for luthiers. I'd just quickly like to talk about John Doppiera, because he's the most inspirational person for me. Back in the 1920s and 30s, I think it was, he must have asked the question, can you have a floating soundboard? And he came up with the resonator series. There's 3 of them, and this was before amplification. And post-amplification, of course, his idea disappeared for a while and it's become iconic. But he, at this point in time, is the only person I know who's succeeded at having a floating soundboard. And it's worth discussing the floating soundboard because it's a concept that basically means that very little of the vibrational sound or energy is going into the instrument. It's actually staying on the soundboard, hence the sustain that all resonators have. And if you think about it in terms of, say that's the soundboard, if it's fixed on the side of the instrument, when the vibration hits the side, it literally drives the vibration into the side because it's fixed. But if it's not fixed, it can, at a micro level, rock, which is just wonderful, because basically you're not buying the instrument, you're plucking it. You're not putting much energy into a string at all, and therefore you really want to capture as much of that energy as you can. And John Doppiera did that, and he's been a total inspiration. When this instrument evolved, it was by accident, and that was a wonderful thing, because if you think about it, if you take a mandolin down 2 semitones, you're in the jazz tone, the jazz area, you know, B flat or F or whatever it is. But I've got this back up in mandolin area, which is just here, so I'll just try and play a little bit. Now that's with the King Billy soundboard, which is getting the fundamentals, which sounds good to me. We'll go up the neck a bit. Whoops. There we go. Quick minor key. That'll do. For luthiers who are interested, or possibly even a tiny bit interested, contact me, and what I will be able to do is explain in detail the best way to build this, because that's been a process of elimination, as the rest of my work has been, and it's pretty straightforward, and I can offer the best advice on how to do that. Looking forward to hearing from some luthiers all around the world.